Tonight I saw Gundam GQuuuuuuX with my brother Victor and his wife Hope, and they both enjoyed the film as Gundam fans. Both of them liked Witch from Mercury, and they seemed to see this as being in the same train of thought. They both seemed interested to see the next installment, and let me just, right up front, if you don't know anything about this and you're asking yourself, should I watch this? It's a part one that has absolutely no sense of resolution whatsoever within the span of this film. It really kind of just ends. It's just like, bam, credits, and you're like, oh, I guess this is the first episode. It's only like 75 minutes long, which I don't mind that aspect. The film looks incredible, so I think keeping it to a shorter length was probably what made it manageable on a production standpoint. Aside from the fact that it is entirely reliant on existing technique. And this is why I'm going to get into the question I had watching this film. Does Gundam GQuuuuuuX have artistic merit as a piece of media? Or is it just simply a hit of Gundam heroin? Like, is it just there for people who can't stop Gundaming to Gundam a little bit more? Or is there anything, like, sincere behind this project other than on the, like, producer brain level? So I'm going to break down, like, how I saw this movie, because I didn't know almost anything about this. I had seen the, like, teaser trailer that came out, like, at the end of last year, I think, and I thought, okay, this looks like a Kazuya Tsurumaki work, because you've got a girl running up the arm of a robot, which is something that has happened in every single thing he's directed. And also it looks like The Witch from Mercury in that it's got younger looking, cutesier girl Gundam pilot, which is kind of a new realm for Gundam in the 2020s, because Gundam started as the very serious, realistic character design style of the 80s. And then in the 90s, they introduced this other, like, Bishonen parallel universe thing that every couple of years they would make a new show where it's like a bunch of pretty boys piloting Gundams. And then they started trying to make kid-friendly Gundam throughout the 2000s and the 2010s. Was really more early 2010s in particular, really geared towards trying to make kid-friendly Gundam. And so finally, they've come around full circle to aiming Gundam at young girls and Yuri fans in particular, which isn't too surprising, really, if you think about it. Like, as soon as they started trying to market Gundam to girls, it worked. Like, Gundam Wing was the first, like, globally successful Gundam show, really. Like, not to say that Gundam wasn't globally known, but here in the United States, nobody knew what the fuck a Gundam was until Gundam Wing was airing on pre-Adult Swim. So it doesn't seem too strange to imagine that if you could lure girls in with pretty boys, you could also lure girls in with just, like, actually relatable young girl protagonists. And since anime fan boys also love cute girls in general, it makes sense. It just makes as much sense as having pretty boys did in the 90s. What I did not expect going into this film, and now I'm going to get into spoiler territory, was what the first 20 minutes are. And if you're a Gundam fan and you know you're going to watch this movie and you haven't had it spoiled for you yet, you might as well just knock it out. Again, it's on 75 minutes. It's pretty to look at. Maybe not in theaters. I don't think it was worth. I mean, I didn't have to pay for my ticket. Vic and Hope had, like, reward points or something. They, again, enjoyed the film. It was $15 a ticket. I had actually bought a ticket for my husband, but then had refunded it because he didn't realize he would have to be up so late to see it, and he had to work early. I don't think he would have enjoyed the film. I think he would have looked at it as a waste of time and money. But for me, at least I can make a video about it, so I will get something out of the time I spent watching the film. But there was definitely, like, a moment where it crossed a threshold of, this is no longer something I'm watching because I'm enjoying it. It's now something I'm watching because I need to be able to talk about it like confidently. I need to see everything that happens so that I can talk about it, even though I have emotionally totally disengaged from the film multiple times. I would say I re-engaged and disengaged because of the way that the film is formatted. And we'll get into that. It's incredibly weird, and not in the good way. That's what I was hoping for, by the way. When I heard Kazuya Tsurumaki and Enokito Yoji working together on this, that's the team that wrote Fooly Cooly and directed Fooly Cooly. That's the team that they both worked on Die Buster together, and those are tremendously more exciting, more original, more interesting pieces of work than this, which heavily borrows from everything else Tsurumaki has done. And that's not unusual for an anime director, don't get me wrong. It only feels a little bit weirder because Tsurumaki has had such a threadbare career compared to most, where like he, started off basically on Evangelion working under Hideaki Anno, doing work for a couple of his shows with Gainax. He ended up directing Fooly Cooly in the year 2000, directing Die Buster in I think 2004, and then he pretty much ended up being in charge of the Rebuild project for the next like 20 goddamn years. I know he did Dragon Dentist in there somewhere, which I never got around to watching. And I like things about the Rebuild movies. You will truly understand how much of Tsurumaki's movies those are, if you didn't already, from watching this one, because it's only Tsurumaki's ideas without Anno's. It doesn't feel like a Hideaki Anno thing at all to me. My brother Victor said that he thought the first part of it felt Anno-esque in that it is such an accurate recreation of the first episode of Gundam. So now we're going to start the spoilers. So the film starts off literally just shot for shot recreating the first 5-10 minutes. I think it's probably just 5 minutes. The first 5 minutes of the original Mobile Suit Gundam. It's starting, I'm like, what the fuck? So is this going to be like a side plot or something, and it's literally the same scene. Is this just to show off what the animation looks like? And I think that was the biggest part of it, was to kind of acclimate you to the idea of how the Gundams are going to look in this universe, because all the designs are different. They're just different enough that in ways that make them aesthetically work with the CGI and the modern digital painting and everything. And every shot they recreate does look amazing. It doesn't look like the original show. They didn't try to copy the color work, which is what makes the original show look so gorgeous. The colors are just fucking incredible in that show. I don't think the color work is as strong in this film in the sense of having that memorable dreamlike atmosphere. But in terms of the details and looking like realistic sci-fi, or just kind of taking the world of Gundam and making it feel that much more realized, I think it does a great job of that, where the colonies look like they have as many buildings in them as they would, if that makes sense. And that's something that you could abstractly identify in the original show, but now it's all of that is there, which is painstaking and maybe unnecessary, because I don't think it necessarily looks... The movie looks better than the original TV show because frame for frame, the original TV show wasn't always gorgeous. But the overall sense of art design, I do not think is nearly as strong in this film. And I don't mind the updates to the way the colonies look, the way the Gundams look. All of that was fun to see. But as the film goes along and it starts introducing its own new ideas, that's when the aesthetics start to really get bizarre and, to me, kind of fall apart. All right, I'm going to try to describe what I think they're going for with this movie. It did not click with me in the ways that I think it should have. So the gimmick of this movie is that in the starting scene of Gundam, when Char and his two Zaku buddies invade Side 7, they see the Gundam, and Char just goes, "Oh, what's this?" and gets in it and starts piloting it and fucks everything up. He immediately steals White Base. He makes it back to Zeon. He destroys everything in his way. And this part of the film struck me as particularly odd, because I was like, okay, this doesn't mean anything if you haven't seen the original show. this feels totally meaningless outside the context of knowing what happens in the original Mobile Suit Gundam, because there is no drama. The drama in the original show begins with Amuro discovering the Gundam. If Amuro never discovers the Gundam, there's nothing dramatic about Char just winning, which is pretty much just what happens for like 20 straight minutes of this film. Is Char gets the Gundam, he realizes all of its potential. Because of him getting the Gundam and what Zeon is able to do, they find out about new types right away and that he is a new type. They build like bits onto the Gundam, they paint it red for him, of course. And at this point in the movie, I was feeling like this is a fucking isekai. This is a rebirth isekai for Char. Like it literally feels like a fan fiction where the idea is somebody was thinking, okay, like what if Char found the Gundam and just won the war? What would that do to the Gundam universe? But the way that that's expressed is through like being in Char's head and like him literally doing like all the same things an isekai protagonist does when they wake up in the new universe with their new powers, you know, where he's like testing all the parameters and everything and then just winning lots of easy battles and just kind of changing the course of how the whole civilization's operating. But in most isekai, they would have to establish all of the world building of like what this means. Like, what is this changing? What is this different from? This film doesn't bother to do that because it assumes you know the original Gundam. So we never like cut to the Federation at all. We never meet Bright Noah. We never meet, you know, anybody, obviously, because the white base was stolen. So like none of the Federation characters that would have been relevant to us in the TV show are relevant here. So we meet most of the Zeon characters because in this universe, Zeon wins the war and the Federation essentially doesn't exist, you know. So the Zeon characters will be important in this story going forward. How? We will not learn that in this film. It's just like, again, it's trying to set up this alternate universe that it eventually time skips to. And so it uses Char as like this grounding rod to establish all the logic of, okay, this is basically UC Century Gundam, but here's the reason Zeon won instead, and that Char, you know, had Gundam and figured out he was a new type, and this causes certain cultural shifts in the universe of the story that will be important. But again, they're meaningless if you don't know the original Gundam. Like, knowing about new types, the way the whole new type experience as presented in this film is like, it doesn't mean anything contextually yet. Like, in the original Gundam, everything had such purpose that just taking elements and, like, kind of reworking them randomly, it just feels off. Like, it feels lopsided. Char shouldn't just be, like, a good guy that we follow, you know? He's not the hero of the story. Even in his backstory OVA from, like, a decade ago or whatever, I can't remember Mobile Suit Origin. In Origin, like, it was already kind of awkward following Char because, again, we knew he was just going to win. It was just, like, that he was unexpectedly sociopathic. Like, it was realizing, oh, he really was that bad of a guy all along, you know? And also kind of painting him as, like, this ridiculous uber genius. But, like, I wouldn't even say that was perfect, but it still felt a lot more meaningful than this. Like, it felt like it was an elaboration on Char's character from Gundam that did help you understand him better, and it felt coherent with the Char that we knew from the show. This is like, they like mention the fact that he's after the zombies like once, but not even why. Like, they don't even establish his, like, motivations in this film. And what they do establish, though, is, like, this new gay romance thing he's got. Because in this version of the story, Char discovered this idea of MAV combat, where basically, because of Minovsky particles, which are basically like fog of war for detectors, in war in the Gundam universe, if you can lay eyes on the enemy first, you're most likely going to win. Like, because whoever fires first, like, you're probably going to get the kill shot. And you always put the enemy on the defense. So if you have a backup person, then you just have more advantages. I don't know. It seems obvious. It just wasn't something that was in Gundam ever, but at some point it was discovered in the world of mecha anime that shipping is a huge part of the culture of mecha anime, that people love the robots and they also love to create romance between the characters. And in order to just facilitate having implications about relationships that you don't really have to flesh out with lots of detail of how those relationships form in the story, just make them partners. Just make them have to pilot the fucking thing together. It's worked many, 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 many times in many different anime, but it's becoming more and more commonplace. Darling in the Franxx obviously took it the farthest, where they're they're fucking in the robot, they're fucking in the Franxx in that show. In this show, it's not as sexual, but it's so overt with the romantic underpinnings of the idea of a Mav, where every time that Char interacts with this dude, it's tremendously flirtatious feeling. And he's obsessed with Char, because so what happens is after Char wins the war for Zeon, he disappears. He just a big thing, a big explosion happens and he vanishes, and we teleport 5 years into the future. And so now we're in the world where Zeon won, and so they've established all of these, independent colonies, but they also have militarized police, and they're obviously, assholes. So Char's Mav is still trying to obsessively find him, and for some reason it's a secret that he was Char's Mav, or it's a rumor and people don't believe it or whatever. I don't know why. I guess I should mention that right before he goes into the portal or whatever, he encounters a mobile suit and he's Artesia, which again in the context of this film means nothing. And when he said that, my brother goes, "Interesting." And I was literally thinking right before this moment, wow, this film is really not interesting. And then that moment happened and he said interesting, and I was I mean, it's something, but it felt like him saying that, him exclaiming interesting, was a release from the 10 straight minutes of nothing interesting whatsoever happening. That was just setting up, the basic details of what Zeon now having won means. Really not even that. It was just setting up how Zeon wins. And it was such a linear thing. Maybe that's why it was so boring to me, is that it felt so obvious what would happen, and it does, It's literally just 20 minutes, again, of Char winning. I was what would happen if Char got the Gundam? He'd win. And yup, that's what happens, and then he mysteriously disappears. So, of course, 5 years later, the Red Gundam has shown up again, and it starts just kind of causing random conflict that nobody understands. They can't get in we don't see Char again, so we don't know if it's really him in there, because, of course, this is a classic thing to do with a Char and a Gundam, have some mystery over his identity, and if it's really Char, of course. But this is really where the story begins, because it's when we introduce the young characters, the young girls, for the most part, who are at the actual center of the story. And they are pretty, the main girl is pretty much just described as a totally average schoolgirl who just feels a lack of sense of freedom, because she's never seen the real sky, she's never seen the real sea, she lives on a colony. So I guess she wants to see Earth. She doesn't really explicitly say that, but she seems to just generally fight in the name of freedom. And so when there is a moment where she realizes that the military police are anti-freedom, then she's well, I guess we are against them, It's very loose with the character motivations, and they're more motivated by their interest in other characters and wanting to, I guess, see the plot continue for themselves. It just feels I didn't really understand the motivations of the main characters during this film. And aside from the main pink-haired girl, you've got the darker-haired girl who looks suspiciously like Nina Mori from Fooly Cooley, and she's like a terrorist, I guess, but she's got the personality of like Mio from K-On!, so she's like very meek, and kind of shy and trying to like keep on the down low, but not very good at hiding her emotions type of a character. The way the show introduces them is like the one girl steals something from the other one. They have an encounter where she like yanks her off of something, and then it's like they hug, like an accidental hug scene type thing, and the whole screen becomes like luscious, like wow, first hug, like this is a couple, and I was kind of like, oh, like that's how they're going to make us, not anything of one character recognizing something about the other that is lovable, just like, hey, just so you know, Yuri flag. It felt very direct, and yet that relationship barely gets built on in this episode. And later on, the main girl meets this boy who is, I guess, the two of them are new types. But like the second she lays eyes on him, she's just like in love. She's like, oh my God, he's so beautiful. She's like stammering, talking to him. And then like not long after this, she's in a combat scenario where she's fighting and like screaming his name and passionately like, oh, I gotta save that boy I like. And it's like, you just met this guy, like I don't even remember his name. It just, everything happens with this immediateness that it's not that I even think it's like bad, it's just very hard to care about. It doesn't make me think it's unbelievable that the characters are like this. It's just like there's no depth to them. There's nothing to make me want to see more of their story. I didn't feel like, oh, I need to know what happens to pink hair girl or dark hair girl or aloof guy, or who ends up with whom. I truly don't care at all. None of them stood out to me. And then there's also like this whole subcast that gets introduced in like one shot where it's like all four of them, and you immediately have the sense of like, oh, four people I couldn't possibly care about, like they all look annoying, they all look like they're definitely gonna die. Like the same with the Mav guy with Char. Like my impression when that character was introduced is, oh, this is the character they can kill, like this is the character who will definitely die in the story, because Char will have to at least live to the end, if not, I don't know. I assume there's no further connection to the original Gundam universe other than that the Char from that universe is in this one in some fashion. It's possible none of this is the same universe because the Gundam doesn't look the same. The robots all look different. It's a Studio Kara logic. And that gets me to where my mind started going as I'm watching this film because, again, like, I was somewhat invested in the beginning when I was like, oh, this is like the original show, but where are they going to take it? And then where they were taking it was not interesting, so I lost investment until it switched and it became this new show. And then I really wanted to get invested, but nothing was clicking with me. The characters didn't click, the design sense didn't click. The backgrounds and the music, actually, those are the only things. I liked the background art, and I really was digging the breakbeats to Dissociate 2 mix that was the music in this film. If YouTube recommends you the same music it recommends me, you will love the music in this film. And there's some good on vocal stuff, but like there's a bunch of scenes where it's like playing this super intense, like frenetic, fun music, and like nothing's happening. Characters are standing around, it's a few establishing shots. There's a period towards the back end of the film where the pacing just grinds to a fucking halt. And I can't help but think that this is 3 episodes of a show. Like, this wasn't built to always be a 70-minute film or whatever. It is also built to at some point be cut into a TV show run, I think, because the way that the action peaks and falls, like, I keep saying the first 20 minutes is the Char story because I'm pretty sure it's like a 1 episode length of the Char story. And then there's like a 1 episode length before there's a big battle, in the story of these new girls. And then another 1 episode length before another battle that ends the film. But it's, again, so abrupt. It in no way feels like the end of a movie. Nothing is resolved. In fact, most things aren't even established. We're barely into the story when the movie just ends, and it's like, oh, like I don't even know all the like factions that like there's a guy who pilots the GQuuuuuuX Gundam, and I believe he's with Zeon, but for whatever reason there's other Zeon people who like don't recognize him, and so they haven't really fully established what are the different factions by the end of this movie. So like I can't imagine going into the next one and with any emotion other than I hope it makes sense now, like I hope this movie will make me care about all the things established in that last movie. I just can't imagine wanting to see that because nothing in this one grabbed me, so why would anything in the next one grab me? And so as I'm like fading out of emotionally being able to care about the film, I'm trying to understand it from a producer mindset. Like, why does this exist? What is the motive of a film like this? And it felt more and more cynical to me as it went on, and it just kept introducing more and more and more ideas that to me seemed incongruent with one another. Just ideas that have no place in the same film universe. And, like, maybe could be justified. I mean, I love stories that are all over the place. And Fooly Cooly is one of my favorite anime of all time. I love Tsurumaki's style. But this film didn't feel like it justified any of it. It didn't feel like it made sense for it to be the way that it was. I was just constantly like, why do the characters look like they come from a totally fucking different universe? It's just 5 years later. It's not a different universe, and all of the old characters are still running around. So you've got all these old dudes who look like Gundam, and the new characters, I kept thinking as the movie's going, they look like Pokemon characters. It's literally Take character designs. Take, who does a lot of the Pokemon character designs, who did the designs, I believe, for Katana Gatari, who, like, the most postmodern anime designer imaginable. And those designs are just in the same world as Char. It's like, I thought that the idea was going to be that Char teleports to another universe where things look like this and he'd be the only one there. But no, Char vanishes, we skip 5 years later, and then Red Gundam is back. Again, all of the Zeon characters are still around. It's just that young people, for some reason, now look like Pokemon characters. What? Why? And they don't look at all like they're in the same movie. Basically, every single visual that is in this film is well done, but is something I have seen before, either in the original Mobile Suit Gundam or in one of Kazuya Tsurumaki's other works. Because every single image in this film, I could point you to a scene in either Fooly Cooly or Die Buster or in one of the Rebuild movies where these same shots happen. And they're good shots, but they don't have the same emotional weight that they did, because those shots were, the reason that they existed in their original context is that, like, the emotions of the scene warranted it. And in this film, it kind of just feels like they're all just there. You know, like an action scene is happening, and so it plays out the way that a Kazuya Tsurumaki action scene would. You know, it's just, it's got the beats, the specific shots that he's used before, which feels like odd. It's like, what, did he storyboard this? I don't, like, why would it look so much like his other work? And this is a collaboration film between Studio Khara and Studio Sunrise. Now, Studio Khara and Studio Sunrise are the two forefront studios when it comes to animating mecha. There's very few studios left who can animate mecha. Sunrise assimilated almost all of the mecha animators that exist. And Khara really was doing all kinds of revolutionary stuff with the Rebuild movies in terms of what they're doing with the visuals. Like, the action scenes in the Rebuild movies are nuts. And it's not even that they're nuts in a way that's, like, cinematically brilliant in the sense of, like, the fight scene from End of Evangelion, the one that was animated entirely by Mitsuo Iso, is, like, cinematically perfect. Nothing in the Rebuild movies is as good as that, but it uses technology that just didn't even exist, or like, techniques that just didn't even exist until they did them. And so it has this uniqueness where you watch those films and you're like, wow, I've definitely never seen that before. Like the start of Rebuild 4, the whole fucking thing where they're like throwing all the Eiffel Towers around and shit, and like just it's a baffling fight scene. It's nuts. But it's definitely some shit I have never seen before. So like this film has none of that. It's actually literally a bunch of stuff I've seen in Rebuild, in Gundam. And it struck me as this was made to compare notes. Like this was made so the animators for these two studios could literally just teach each other their techniques. Like, hey, let's you give us some of that good Gundam technique, we'll give you some of that good Ava technique. We could all homogenize our brands even fucking further as it all turns into just a goop of mech, a paste of toy robot. And like I think this is kind of inevitable because the mecha genre is like pretty dead, like it's not that mecha shows don't come out at all, it's just that the mecha fan base is so singular that if you even make two different mecha shows that compete with one another, like it's too much. There's not enough mecha fans to afford that much mecha. They can afford to buy a couple model kits a year, So it's gonna be whatever are your couple of favorite Gundams, or if they make a fucking Rebuild movie, whatever dumb shit, new shit they made up. But this has all of the hallmarks of the Rebuild films, where they redid every design, but it's it's the same but different. Oh, it's RX-78, but he's got a weird face now. It's it's Zaku, but it's got different joints and a little bit of a different face now. Oh, there's a red version of the Gundam, of course, So like from that like toy printing perspective, it just feels like, oh yeah, this is about IP, which it always is with Gundam. Obviously, it is first and foremost just a very powerful IP. The guy who created it has not had his hands on it in recent years, and I'm sure doesn't want to really. He's dusted his hands of it multiple times over the decades. It has been off-brand, lost in its messaging. It's had many, many terrible installments. Well, maybe many is a stretch. It's had a share of terrible installments. So it's not like any of this is new for Gundam. It's not like I was uniquely disappointed by this movie as like a Gundam viewer. It was just like, oh, okay, it's just another one. That was kind of my feeling, was like I was hoping that because it's Kazuya Tsurumaki and Enokito Yoji and this collaboration between these studios, that this is them trying to do something really new with Gundam. And that is the opposite of the feeling I got. I got the feeling that this was very much trying to take all of Gundam and unify it into one intellectual property space. And there was a few very important things this film did. The one that I found the most cynicism with is Gundam Fight. Gundam Fight is in this movie. I don't think they call it that, but so when Gundam started going truly commercial in the 90s, but they ran into the issue quickly of Gundam's a fucking war story. It's dark and grim. It's not pleasant. It's sad. It's not for young people, really. It just happens to be toy driven in terms of how it's marketed. But the fans mostly buy the toys because they love the show and they want to support the show, and they like the the representation of the show. But in the 90s it became like, how do we just get people to like want to buy these fucking as many of these toys as possible? So they started inventing these offshoot Gundams, like Mobile Fighter G Gundam, which is like an absurd cartoon take on the premise where war is over, but also Earth is just a battleground that is used as like a boxing ring every 4 years so that colonies can determine which one is going to be president for the next term. It's totally insane, but it takes itself seriously and it's really fun. And following from that, every Gundam had to figure out where does it stand on like how much of a war story is this? How much of a goofball, like how much is this for kids? How much is this for teens? How much is this for adults? And they've just struggled so much over the years, where they created Gundam Age, which was like an attempt to make an explicitly for children war story that just didn't work. And then they started making Gundam Build Fighters, and that was where they just said, okay, well, what if it's like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where you've got the virtual Duel Monsters game, except that it's Gundam toys, Then this can actually be marketed to kids, because it's actually not a war story. It's just a Gundam toy ad, and like because it had decent writing, people loved Gundam Build Fighters. It went over extremely well. In this film, we've taken original Gundam, UC Gundam, and its most popular character, Char. We've decided that we're going to tell a new alternate universe story, but it's still UC Gundam. So it's not AU Gundam, it's UCAU Gundam, because it has no correlation to anything but the original show. None of the sequels, nothing that happens past the first episode of the original show really has much to do with this film series, other than that you have to have seen it for it to make any fucking sense in the first place. So you took the Char, the most popular character, you put him in this new story that is clearly marketed towards teens/kids, and then in that universe where there is real war and there is real consequences, there is also a version of Gundam fight where there isn't real consequences, so that the characters can have Gundam fights without real consequences. Now, they already did this in Witch from Mercury, and it made no fucking sense in that show. This makes more sense because it's presented as it's just a sport that exists in the universe. Like, hey, sometimes we just get in robots and beat each other up. Does it make sense? No. Just run with it. I'm more okay with that than Witch from Mercury did this weird Utena send-up thing where that show felt like if you hadn't seen Gundam and Revolutionary Girl Utena, then it didn't make any fucking sense. This one at least doesn't heavily couch its identity in anything other than the director's previous work and Mobile Suit Gundam. But just, I don't know, everything about it felt very forced to me. It felt like, okay, we have to have something that's kid-friendly, something that appeals to Yuri fans, something that appeals to the Yaoi fans, something that appeals to the OG Gundam fans, something that's, it has to constantly be nostalgic, but also constantly be different, and yet nothing that happens is new. None of the character archetypes are new. None of them are interesting or deep. The design sense all feels like it's referencing other stuff. Even the Take designs, as Take designs go, are some of the least interesting that they've ever designed. So it just felt to me like, I don't know, like the least possible that could be done to impress as many people as possible. Which is to say, to have really impressive visuals in animation, but don't try to do anything new with them. Just take things you already know work and update that, with this new visual coat of paint. And maybe you could look at it like the animators have to get used to what they're doing, and then they're going to really bust out some crazy shit in the next one. But again, like, the writing quality is just so nothing that it left me with nothing to look forward to. Why would I think anything interesting could happen in this story when nothing interesting happened so far, except for what is interesting to me purely as somebody who's seen original Gundam and is going, oh, well, why is it different? Doesn't seem like it's different in any interesting ways or for any interesting reasons so far. All right, that's my take on GQuuuuuX. I'm sure most people enjoyed this who saw it more than I did, because I feel like I'm not really the audience for mecha. I think I am the audience for the original Mobile Suit Gundam, in the sense that I just like good shows made by, visionary creators. But I'm not automatically enthusiastic to see robots, to think about the robot designs, to watch them fight or whatever, like, most of the fights in this film felt totally empty to me because there were no stakes. It was obvious nobody was important was going to die. None of them had done anything yet. So there was never a fight that made me go, uh-oh, what's happening now? It was just like, yeah, they sure are whipping around doing stuff I saw in Eva. So let me know what you thought of GQuuuuuX, and thanks again for listening. I've been Trixie the Golden Witch. Go watch all my videos and send me money. Thanks again. Anime forever.